Hello again, my name's John Paton and welcome to our morning reflection. Now, I hope I'm not alone in saying that while I was much younger, I had probably too much confidence in my own abilities, never really paying too much attention or as much attention as I should have to those who knew better. From the set readings of today, I've chosen to reflect on the Old Testament story of Saul, the first king of Israel from around 1300 years ago. The reading is from 1 Samuel chapter 10. It's a long reading, so here is a shortened version. Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, "Has not the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance? When you leave me today, you will meet two men near Rachel's tomb at Zelah on the border of Benjamin. They will say to you, 'The donkeys you set out to look for have been found.' And now your father has stopped thinking about them and is worried about you. He is asking, 'What shall I do about my son?' Then you will go on from there until you reach the great tree of Tabor. 3 men going up to worship God at Bethel will meet you there. One will be carrying 3 young goats, another 3 loaves of bread, and another a skin of wine. They will greet you and offer you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from them. After that you will go up to Gibeah of God. There will be a Philistine, where there is a Philistine outpost. As you approach the town, you will meet a procession of prophets coming down from a high place with lyres, timbrels, pipes, and harps being played before them, and they will be prophesying. The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you." Saul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where have you been?" "Looking for the donkeys," he said. But when he saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel. Saul's uncle said, "Tell me what Samuel said to you." Saul replied, "He assured us that the donkeys had been found." He did not tell his uncle what Samuel had said about his kingship. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, most of us today have had to work and work hard to get where we are today. It is something of a bonus if we are lucky enough to find ourselves in the kind of work that suits our capabilities, whether that meant working with our hands or with our minds. But one of the first, if not the first lesson I learned after leaving the shelter of home and school and finding myself in the real world, the world of work, was that I wasn't quite as smart as I thought I was. In this uncompromising world, it was, as the saying goes, sink or swim. To be able to swim in this world, in my case, meant admitting an inadequacy of not listening to other people. So I soon realised I had to listen if I was to learn from those who actually knew what they were talking about. So what has this to do with Saul, the first king of Israel? The previous chapter, we are introduced to Saul with the story of his father's lost donkeys. Saul had set off with a servant to try and find them. They were never found, however, but during his search, Saul is introduced to Samuel. At the time, the entire nation of Israel recognized that Samuel was God's powerful prophet. In his search for the lost animals, we are told that Saul was unaware of Saul's existence, let alone his role as prophet of Israel. He remained focused on the lost animals. He was the son of an ordinary farmer belonging to the smallest tribe of Israel. He certainly didn't have political or spiritual aspirations. But nevertheless, he was anointed by Saul to be the first king of Israel. And it didn't take long after this for his inadequacies to show themselves. Now, although God had provided Saul with a remarkable mentor in the prophet Samuel, with an intelligent and skillful warrior in his son Jonathan, and with a loyal and devoted friend in David, men who could have helped Saul rule well, but in his time as king, humility was one thing he lacked. Saul never fell to his knees before God. He never asked help or advice, deciding he didn't need help from friends or from God. or the help of those, or advice of those closest to him, which in turn led to his downfall and a rather inglorious death. Now, it might be suggested that Saul's inadequacies were down to God, it was his fault. But I suggest that this can easily be a situation many of us found ourselves in. When we find God has put us in a place we either hadn't considered ourselves capable or, if asked, didn't really want. But it is his prerogative to give us whatever responsibility he decides in order to further the kingdom of God. To do so, he also provides us with the help of others, as well as the abilities, the tools to do the job. Unlike Saul, who had so much to offer his people, we only have to acknowledge the help that others can give us and be willing to use the abilities we have. Now, to finish with a prayer. Our Father in heaven, when our faith falls for whatever reason, when we feel we can't go on, help us to trust you more. Help us to take our eyes off the mountain before us and set our eyes on you, the God who moves the mountains. Amen. And for the rest of this day, keep yourself safe